125,000 acres of nothing.
Because the noise they were planning on making would wake the dead.
It's like a horror movie.
And as it turns out, the cleanest. That cloud up there, which was generated by the engine, is just a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. It's water vapor. And in about an hour's time, someone in Mississippi is going to get wet. It's raining! NASA's playing God. It's making its own weather.
A lot of new people who want to know what this is and why it's happening. Can you give us an introduction?
Yeah, again, the term geoengineering, aka chemtrails, the layman's term for what we see happening in the skies, but this is weather modification on a global scale. In fact, these programs are so large and so all-encompassing that all other weather modification programs that go on a smaller regional basis are virtually, they're negated by the scope and scale of the global geoengineering programs. And these programs involve a number of aspects. You have the saturation of the atmosphere with various chemical and metal particulates. And there appear to be various purposes and objectives with this saturation. In conjunction with the saturation, which ionizes the atmosphere, it makes the atmosphere more conductive, we have the HAARP facilities, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. These are ionosphere heaters. Many have heard of the HAARP facilities. There's not just one or two or three. We believe there's at least 18 around the globe, possibly with 3 more being built in Antarctica right now. And once the atmosphere is saturated with these particulates, and then you add the ionosphere heaters, the entire weather system globally is virtually being thwarted. There is no natural weather at this point, and we really don't know what sort of climate conditions we would have necessarily if these programs were brought to a halt, and they desperately need to be brought to a halt, because the saturation of the atmosphere is thwarting the hydrological cycle. It's totally disrupting the rain cycle. Again, we have the artificially nucleated snowstorms, which I just mentioned. You can't go from 100 degrees to snow in one day without a whole lot of help. This includes jet stream manipulation with the HAARP facilities, and we are not guessing at this. We have monitoring sources for this signal, and we can see where the signal is most intense, and that's what steers the jet stream. So then you add artificial ice nucleation, which is a chemical nucleation process. They can turn what should have been rain into snow and drop the temperatures of these storm systems by this artificial chemical nucleation. This isn't sci-fi, this is hard science fact. The weather disseminating agencies are trying desperately, their task, and they're all owned at the very top, it appears, by the Rothschilds and or other parts of the global elite complex. Rothschilds in particular are ownership of Weather Channel, Weather Central, Weather Underground. And it was imperative that they own these agencies, otherwise there would be great discrepancy in trying to explain away these events.
There's a documentary that all of us need to watch.
What is it about?
Chem-Trails. Every single person that he interviewed worked for the military, and they're like, yes, this is in fact what we're doing. These planes are outfitted with these sprayers spraying aluminum particles in the air.
Oh my gosh.
To reflect the UV sun rays back into the atmosphere where it doesn't heat up our oceans and stuff.
Do they know how insulation works?
Apparently not. They've been doing this since the 50s. This was an article from Popular Science magazine, 1958. Air Force scientists are already experimenting with sodium vapor ejected from jet planes to intercept solar radiation. All these methods would regulate heat in different parts of the Earth's atmosphere. This is the basis of global weather control. Here's a quote for you. This is from Lyndon B. Johnson. He who controls the weather controls the world. Like, this chemical 100% causes cancer, and we're just spraying
And it can't be just for climate control.
Well, it's also probably furthering this whole agenda of...
reduce population.
Exactly.
I don't know if y'all know this, but I actually work in a cloud factory. We create clouds and make rain for the city of Chicago. The government doesn't want you to know this. We control the climate.
This is what I've been trying to tell y'all all along. They have actual factories that make these clouds. A lot of the weather is controlled, and we could take it back and control it.
You ever wonder why so many people are suddenly getting sick? The air feels heavier, the storm's more violent, and the season's more unpredictable. This isn't just climate change, they're engineering the weather and it's affecting you. It's called cloud seeding, a process where planes release chemicals like silver iodide into the sky to manipulate. These chemicals don't just disappear, they fall back down into our air, our water, our bodies. Then there's HAARP blasting the atmosphere with electromagnetic waves, disrupting natural weather patterns, possibly even triggering storms, hurricanes, and earthquakes. They control the rain, the droughts, the disasters, and now they're controlling your health. They can manipulate the sky. What else are they doing to us?
Got almost 100,000 views on it because people they're joining me and saying, what? Federal law allows for weather modification experiments involving the use of human subjects for the testing of chemical and biological agents and open air testing of chemical and biological agents. How outrageous is that? There's no consent. There's no consent when you can't escape, when you can't sequester yourself from it. Let me read this again. U.S. federal law allows for weather modification experiments, the testing, open air testing of chemical and biological agents. Didn't they tell us that we were tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists? That we were imagining chemtrails, that they were really moisture in the air? And then I've had people argue with me in the last 24 hours on my social media saying, oh, they're contrails. Oh, you're just pushing, you're a grifter. You're pushing, that narrative. I'm showing you federal law, you numbnuts. I'm showing you the federal law. Good Lord.
Weather modification is a growing trend both here in Northern California and around the world. So does it work? And why do some people say it could do more harm than good?
Here in downtown San Francisco, at PG&E headquarters, up on the 16th floor, the weather office, where the utility's top weatherman, Byron Marler, studies charts and satellite pictures. Marler's job is to change weather, although he won't say it that way.
We're really not changing the overall picture of the weather in the Sierra Nevada, with the exception of causing a little more snowfall over some of the watersheds. 5 to 10% additional water on an annual basis.
PG&E uses what are basically big propane gas flares in the mountains. But others use different methods, including airplanes to scatter tiny particles of silver iodide to seed clouds.
Most of the watersheds of the Sierra Nevada are cloud seeded by someone.
Water districts, corporate farms, even private individuals all modify the weather with little oversight and no government restrictions.
Court is now in session.
Weather or weather modification, as it's known, has long been the goal of many, from those wanting to make things better for their fellow man to those looking to make it somewhat worse by weaponizing the weather. And it's not as if we haven't been trying. One of the most well-known methods of weather modification is cloud seeding. This is basically spraying tiny particles of silver iodide, dry ice or frozen carbon dioxide, liquid propane and more recently table salt into clouds by planes, rockets and flares. There are two basic methods, the cold rain method and the warm rain method. The cold rain method works in more temperate areas where large convective clouds contain supercooled water. The seeding agents like dry ice provide a nuclei for the supercooled water to freeze around, which then travel on the updrafts into the cloud, picking up more water as they grow larger. When they are large enough, they then fall and melt into rain on the way down. If the storm is very large and has very strong updrafts, they can become so large they don't melt on the way down, but fall as hail. The warm rain method is used in tropical areas where the clouds don't reach the freezing point. So a hygroscopic seed, that's one which absorbs water like salt, is used instead. The tiny droplets coalesce as they also float up and down on the downdrafts, again until they are heavy enough to fall as rain.
Basic building blocks of climate engineering are to saturate the atmosphere with electrically conductive light scattering particles and polymers, particles like aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese. These particles are then manipulated with extraordinarily powerful radio frequency microwave transmissions that can heat the upper layers of the atmosphere like the ionosphere. that are used to create pressure zones that steer upper level wind currents, which then steer weather systems. These particulates, when they are manipulated with these frequencies, can literally move air masses. This is an integral part of climate engineering that is not known or being acknowledged by many. Extraordinarily powerful and dangerous radio frequency microwave transmissions.
Electromagnetic fields are energy sources, and they're going to be interacting with moisture in the air or our bodies or whatever. And therefore, it's not at all surprising that you're going to find some movement in relation to exposure of weather patterns to electromagnetic fields.
Instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far it works. When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning.
I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong.
The USA and Russia have developed the ability to manipulate the weather for military purposes. Indeed, the US Army has honed its skills, enabling them to selectively alter climate patterns, and this technology has been perfected using the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. It is a side project linked to a strategic defense initiative from a military standpoint. HAARP is a weapon of mass destruction that operates in outer space, and it is capable of destabilizing the entire world's agricultural and ecological systems. Climate warfare is the latest weapon of mass destruction, and it has the potential to destabilize the ecosystems of enemy countries, destroying their agriculture or disabling their communication networks. In other words, HAARP's climate-altering techniques can completely undermine a national economy and force millions of people into poverty. It can kill a nation without deploying troops or battle tanks. HAARP is linked to 50 years' worth of intensive, destructive programs focused on learning about and controlling the upper atmosphere. It is an integral part of a long history of space-based research and deliberate military development. The ability to combine missiles, space labs and HAARP, discharging massive amounts of energy, is comparable to a nuclear bomb launched anywhere on Earth, using lasers and particle beams.
The death dumps, otherwise known as chemical trails, are being dropped and sprayed throughout the United States, in England, Scotland, Ireland, Northern Europe, and I have personally seen them not only in the United States, but in Mexico and Canada. Birds are dying around the world. Fish are dying by the hundreds of thousands around the world. This is genocide. This is poison. This is murder by the United Nations. This element within our society that's doing this must be stopped. I happen to know of 2 of the locations where the airplanes are that dump this crap on us. 4 of the planes are out of Air National Guard, Lincoln, Nebraska, and the other planes are out of Fort Still, Oklahoma. I personally have observed the planes that were standing still in Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, at the Air National Guard. They have no markings on them. They're huge, bomber-like airplanes with no markings. This is a crime. Crime against humanity, crime against America, crime against the citizens of this great country. They must be stopped.
As the Biden administration signals its fight against global warming may actually involve blocking sunlight. The White House posting research claiming, quote, solar radiation modification would enable better informed decisions about the potential risk and benefits of SRM as a component of climate policy, alongside the foundational elements of greenhouse gas emissions mitigation. Our next guest warns this is simply government's way to control your weather. Mark Morano, publisher of ClimateDepot.com, and he joins us now. Okay, Mark, my take this morning was maybe this is one of those or else, get on board with everything else or we're going to block the sun. But I guess it's a little bit more, reality than that. Tell us about it.
Well, this is actually Bill Gates funding this as well through Harvard University. This is retro 1970s. In the 1970s, they believed that our fossil fuels were creating aerosols, blocking the sun, creating man-made global cooling. So they came up with the same kind of geoengineering solutions back then. They wanted to put black soot on the Arctic to melt it. There was one proposal to use nuclear energy to help loosen the Arctic ice caps because they thought they were growing too much. And John Holdren, back in the Obama administration, also supported this kind of geoengineering, if you will, of the climate. This is radical, risky, unproven, unknown effects.
Guy who made billions out of creating super clunky corporate software. What you didn't realize is that Bill Gates doesn't think of himself that way. Bill Gates doesn't think of himself as some guy who got super rich making bad software. Bill Gates thinks of himself as God, in control of the solar system. And that's why Bill Gates is now backing something called sun-dimming technology that would reflect sunlight out of the Earth's atmosphere, causing global cooling. Ooh, that's not fraught with risks. You thought gain-of-function research on pathogens was dangerous. Try that. But that doesn't stop Harvard University. Its scientists are testing that technology by spewing calcium carbonate dust into the atmosphere.
Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial. It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth.
Now, just to restate, Bill Gates is not God. Bill Gates is some kind of weird, socially awkward rich guy who lives in Seattle. He doesn't own the planet, but he's now changing the planet single-handedly. This is not just over his yard in Seattle. This is over your yard and our oceans and the whole planet. Now, according to Forbes, Frank Kutch, who is the project's top investigator, quote, does not know what the results might bring. Well, just experiment with the globe and find out what happens. It's cool, though. He's a billionaire. Michael Schellenberger is the author of Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All, which it does, as our rivers and oceans get dirtier and no one notices. Michael, it's great to see you tonight.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
It's a little alarming to think that someone as myopic and out of touch and totally ideological and weird as Bill Gates thinks he's in charge of the planet. What should we be worried about here?
I mean, basically everything. I mean, when I first heard about this over 2 decades ago, this was a thought experiment. But this is real. They're really trying to do this. They've encountered opposition every step of the way. I've co-authored articles with the Harvard investigator. We've told him personally this is a terrible idea. The vast majority of scientists disagree with this. You have to remember what they're proposing to do is identical to what we feared would occur after nuclear war in the 1980s, which is nuclear winter. The idea is that you cool the planet deliberately. The effects on crops are completely unknown. They call this an experiment, but they know that there is no way to figure out what the large-scale planetary effects of this kind of thing would be. It's grossly irresponsible. They know for a fact that they will never get international agreement on this. So they're basically trying to socialize the idea, normalize the idea, make us comfortable with an idea that should make us extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, a guy who cuts his hair with garden shears is now trying to control the solar system. The funny thing is, anyone who notices this, that maybe Bill Gates has outsized control over our lives, is immediately denounced by Snopes or one of these fraudulent fact-checking sites as a conspiracy nut. Do you think you're a conspiracy nut to have concerns about Bill Gates' hubris and ambitions?
No, I mean, this is bonkers. I mean, honestly, there are very few people, when you talk to them privately, that think this is a good idea. There's a lot of people that are very scared to speak out publicly because Bill Gates' influence is extraordinary. He's a massive philanthropist. I think his intentions are very good. Nobody doubts he's well-intentioned. But good intentions can lead to some very bad things. The amount of hubris and arrogance involved here. We're talking about millions of farmers around the world who will be affected by this. How will they be consulted? What is the idea for how this is going to be governed? There is no plan for governance. There is no way to get agreement on this internationally. They know this. You know, Tucker, the thing is, the trends on climate change, most people don't realize they're going in the right direction. The United States has reduced its carbon emissions by more than any other country over the last 20 years. We've had an extraordinary success in the United States in reducing our air pollution, and now we're faced with the prospects of this radical experiment.
If there's one thing we could do to improve our country overnight, it's tax-exempt nonprofits. People like Bill Gates make billions. They die, but they continue to distort our society with these tax-exempt foundations. We should tax them immediately. Pay the rate we pay today. Michael, thank you. Great to see you.
Bill Gates has also been obsessed with the idea of, quote, blocking out the sun using chalk or other types of chemicals. And Bill Gates has also funded research and projects all around the world, not just in America, but across Europe and various other places, that are willing to research and get involved in this type of nefarious, I would call it, practices.
Meanwhile, Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial. It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth.
No, not while my greatest nemesis still provides our customers with free light, heat, and energy. I call this enemy the sun. Since the beginning of time, man has yearned to destroy the sun. I will do the next best thing. Block it out.
Good God.
Imagine it, Smithers. Electrical lights and heaters running all day long.
But, sir, every plant and tree will die. Owls will deafen us with incessant hooting. The town sundial will be useless.
Take one last look at the sun, Springfield.
And to Tallahassee now, the Florida Senate passed a bill today banning weather manipulation, things like cloud seeding and geoengineering. Scientists use the practice to help bring rain to certain areas that need it. Supporters of the bill cite concerns about potential environmental and public health risks. If it becomes law, anybody in violation would face a third-degree felony.
This is about protecting Florida's environment and public health. With no federal guidelines in place, Florida must take responsibility for its own airspace.
I'm not, denying that there might be something going on. It's just we have to have the right methodology to take care of it. And, that's what we do in state government. It's not right for us to just slap on fines or, penalties for folks if we don't really know what we're doing.
Well, the bill also calls for the creation of a hotline for the public to report any suspicious activity. A similar bill is moving through the Florida House.